Hi guys, welcome to another session of News in 30 minutes. Today, let us look at some of the important issues on the 4th of December 2023. Before we get there, just a reminder that a new episode is live for Thinkers and Theories series, so you can have a look at it there. One more doubt that I wanted to clear is this TNT series is not exclusive for GS4 only. It is not only for GS4, it can be used in other GS papers as well. The basic idea of Thinkers and Theories series is to expand your horizon of analysis, over different issues. Okay, so if I take any issue, it can be within society, within geographical aspects, within the international realms, or within the political administrational realms. You should have some tools to analyze these issues, and that is the end goal of the Thinkers and Theories series. So having a note of all these Thinkers and Theories, don't think that they are only relevant for GS4. They are relevant for all the GS papers for you to develop depth in your answer writing. So I hope you are making a note of these Thinkers and Theories series. Okay, all right. So with that, let us start off with some of the important issues on the 4th of December 2023. The first issue is Aditya L1 solar satellites key payload ASPEX begins its operation. Okay, so as you have already heard that we have also done in the previous classes what is Aditya L1. Let me just revise the concept of Aditya L1. Aditya L1 is a space based observatory, and it will be observing the sun. Okay, and it will be placed in a Lagrange point called L1. Okay, now this is, if I take Aditya L1, this is the second space-based observatory of India. The first was AstroSat. AstroSat was launched in 2015. Okay, so the main goal of Aditya L1 is to study the sun, basically the sun's corona, the sun's photosphere, the sun's chromosphere, and after that it also tries to study two aspects of sun, that is solar winds and coronal mass ejections. Okay, coronal mass ejections. Okay, so this is the basic idea of the Aditya L1 mission. And as you also know, if you take this as the sun and this as the earth, okay, so you have, let us say this is the orbit. So let me just redo it. This is the orbit. Okay, so you have the 5 Lagrange points. So you have L1, you have L1, you have L2, you have L3. Okay, so this is L1, L2 and L3. These are the 3 Lagrange points, and then you have L4 and L5. Okay, so this is you can take, these are the equilateral triangle. Okay, so you have the 5 Lagrange points, and as you know, Aditya 1 is going to be placed in L1 Lagrange point, that is between the earth and the sun. Also, another information that I would like to give is, you have heard of James Webb telescope. The James Webb telescope is placed in the L2 Lagrange point, and L1 Lagrange point also already has another observatory that is known as SOHO. This is NASA's observatory. SOHO means solar and heliospheric observatory. Okay, so basically this is what is the entire setup. So we will also be launching Aditya L1 at this point, at L1 Lagrange point. Okay, so basically what is Lagrange point? Okay, a point where the gravitational pull of the two bodies negate one another. The gravitational pull of the two bodies negate one another. Okay, so the gravitational pull applied by both the body balances one another at that particular point, and that point is known as Lagrange point. Okay, so I hope you understood this, and I hope you understood this Aditya L1 mission and its entire setup. Okay, so with this, now if I have to talk about one of the payload that this article is talking about, the payload is known as ASPEX. ASPEX is basically Aditya Solar wind particle experiment. Okay, so Aditya wind particle experiment, that is what is known as ASPEX. Okay, so this ASPEX in turn has two equipments or instruments. The one is known as Swiss, another is known as STEPS. It has two instruments which is known as Swiss and STEPS. Okay, so the Swiss, the full form of Swiss is solar wind ion spectrometer, solar wind ion spectrometer, and the STEPS is supra thermal energetic particle spectrometer. Okay, so basically these spectrometers are there in order to understand the solar winds. Okay, so basically ASPEX is an instrument that tries to measure or that tries to identify solar winds as well as what I told as coronal mass ejections. See, this coronal mass ejections are very important for us to understand because they are large expulsions. They are large expulsions of plasma, that is matter in a very high temperature, that is plasma, and this plasma is coming with its embedded magnetic field. It has an embedded magnetic field. So this coronal mass ejection, when they come towards the Earth's magnetic field, they cause huge interference, and this huge interference can create a problem for our deep space mission. It can also create problems to our satellites, and it can also cause a lot of different phenomena in our atmosphere. So understanding the coronal mass ejection and solar winds is very important. So basically, in very simple terms, what I can say is they are huge burst. They are huge burst of high energy particles, that are coming along with an embedded magnetic field. They have their own embedded magnetic field. So that is what is coronal mass ejection. As you know, corona is the outermost layer of the sun, and from here there is a mass that is ejected at a very high velocity, and this is coming with very high energy as well as magnetic field. So the basic idea of ASPEX is to measure or to identify this coronal mass ejections. Okay, now it identifies this coronal mass ejections through something called proton and alpha particle ratio. Using this, it tries to identify the coronal mass ejection. The proton is nothing but an ionized hydrogen ion. Okay, that is what you call as the proton, and an alpha particle is nothing but doubly ionized helium particle. Okay, so proton is hydrogen ion, and alpha particle is doubly ionized helium ions. Okay, and by measuring the ratio of H plus and He2 plus, we try to understand the coronal mass ejections. Okay, so this is how we try to have an indirect information. This is not a direct information, this is an indirect information regarding coronal mass ejections. Okay, so this is what the article reads. Aditya L1 solar satellite key payload ASPEX has begun operation. The operation is to identify the solar winds as well as the coronal mass ejections. And how does this do that? It does that through the proton ratio and the alpha particle ratio. I hope you got this entire background of what this article is talking about, as well as what the entire mission is about. Let us go on to the next issue of the day. The next issue is, again, as I have told you, COP28 is taking place. So a lot of initiatives, pledges, and a lot of agreements will keep coming up. So please make sure that you have a keen observation over this. Now, India and China skip signing renewable power pledge at COP28. 118 countries have signed it. Now, the global renewables and energy efficiency pledge. This is what they are talking about. India has not signed this pledge. Okay, this global renewables energy efficiency pledge was not signed by India and China at COP28. The pledge committed to tripling global renewable energy capacity by 2030. As you know, the pledge is good. This pledge actually talks about tripling the global renewable energy capacity by 2030. Then why didn't India sign this particular pledge? That is the important thing that you should understand. Now, before that, let me just give you a background in COP28. As you know, COP28 is taking place in UAE, Dubai, And already we have spoken about green credits scheme, which our Prime Minister has announced. Okay, and also you should know that the loss and damage fund is already created in COP28. That is the first initiative that was taken up. The third is in COP28 they launched something called Global Decarbonisation Accelerator. Global Decarbonisation Accelerator. Okay, now this basically Global Decarbonisation Accelerator is, as the name suggests, it is mainly to accelerate decarbonizing, or it is mainly to speed up what we call as energy transition from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels. That is the main idea of Global Decarbonisation Accelerator. Now, as a part of this, as a subcomponent of this, you have something called Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge 2030. Okay. Now, what is this? As the article itself says, this is about tripling. Okay, it is about tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030. Okay, so we are tripling the renewable energy capacity by 2030. And also one more idea of this is to increase the rate of energy efficiency. To increase the rate of energy efficiency by more than 4% by 2030. These are the two objectives of this pledge. Okay, so one pledge is tripling the renewable energy capacity by 2030. Another is increasing the rate of energy efficiency by more than 4% by 2030. These are the two pledges taken under Global Renewable Energy Efficiency Pledge. Okay, however, India and China did not sign this pledge. The reason is because this Global Renewable and Energy Efficiency Pledge requires us to do two things. Okay, now while tripling the renewable energy capacity, it wants to commensurately, okay, it wants to concurrently or commensurately, that is parallelly, it wants us to also reduce our coal usage. That is, they want us to concurrently reduce our coal usage. That is, they want us to phase out coal concurrently with the tripling of renewable energy capacity. Now, this is not possible, especially in case of developing nations. Developing nations not only depend upon their energy for coal. Coal is not only used immensely on energy generation, but coal sector also provides a lot of employment. So not only employment and energy, but our economy is dependent on, the growth is dependent on the coal. So if we go on transitioning towards renewable energy by phasing out coal at a very high rate, then we will come across something called transition risk. This transition risk is, if we try to transition too early, then we will face a lot of consequences because of that, and that is what is transition risk. So what India tells is, we are okay with tripling the renewable energy capacity, but we are not okay commensurately trying to phase out coal. This is the only reason why India has not agreed to Global Renewable and Energy Efficiency Pledge. Okay, so I hope you understood what is COP28, what all issues are being, or what all initiatives are being launched in COP28. And then there was something called Global Decarbonisation Accelerator, within which there is a pledge called Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge, which India did not sign because it requires tripling of renewable energy by 2030, but also commensurately phasing out coal, which India tells is not currently possible, being India being a developing nation. Okay, so this is why India and China have not signed the pledge. So I hope you got this. Okay, let us go to the next issue of the day. The next issue also is talking about COP28. Okay, so global stocktake should account for failures of developed nation. This is what is told by BASIC nations. Okay, as I told you, this global stocktake as a concept, okay, is a fundamental component of 2015 Paris Agreement, which is used to monitor its implementation and evaluate the collective progress made in achieving the agreed goals. So let me just give you a background of what they are talking about. So if you take COP21 of 2015, we signed something called Paris Agreement. And in this Paris Agreement, instead of making nations coercively abide by some targets, Paris Agreement told that each nation can bring up their own nationally determined contributions. Okay, now this nationally determined contribution is completely voluntary, but once the nations declare this nationally determined contributions, then the nations have to abide by whatever they have declared. Okay, so these are known as NDCs. So when the nations declare these NDCs, someone has to monitor how has the nation achieved in abiding by these nationally determined contributions, and that monitoring will come through the concept called global Stocktake. Okay, so global Stocktake is basically a monitoring mechanism of each nation's NDCs. Though NDC is voluntary, it is on the part of the Paris Agreement to make sure that at least these voluntarily declared contributions are being abided to by all the nations, and this is done through global Stocktake. And it was said that though COP21 was the COP21 was the period when the Paris Agreement was signed, it was declared that all the nations will give their national determined contributions, and this will be first monitored. Their performance will be first monitored in 2023, and that is currently happening COP28. So COP28 will be the first time. Okay, COP28 will be the first time from the Paris Agreement that there will be a global Stocktake. So global Stocktake is monitoring all the nations' nationally determined contributions, how well have they performed, and what is their next pledge in reducing their emissions. Okay, so if they performed very well, then that is good, they can continue doing it. If they performed bad, that means that they have to pledge much more higher so that they can make up for the lost cause. That is the overall idea of the global Stocktake. Okay, so in general, we can say that the GST, that is global Stocktake, is nothing but a periodic review mechanism. It was a periodic review mechanism that was established in COP21 of 2015, and it looks into the national determined contributions of every nation, and it takes place, this review takes place for every 5 years once. Okay, because the NDCs pledges keep happening every 5 years once, in commensurate with the NDCs, there will always be a review also 5 years once. So after every 5 years of NDCs, there will be a review done in the form of GST, and this global Stocktake will tell us how the nations have performed. Okay, so this is what is the global Stocktake. Now in this article, there is one more keyword that they use, that is known as basic nations. Okay, so if I take what are these basic nations, now this is a grouping. Okay, this is a grouping that is mainly a climate climate grouping. If I say climate grouping, this grouping is mainly to talk with climate negotiations. Okay, it can be regarding funds, it can be regarding initiatives, it can be regarding setting up of agreements. So anything to do with the climatic negotiations, this basic nations have come together. Who are these basic nations? They are 4 newly industrialized nations. That includes Brazil, that includes South Africa, that includes India, and that includes China. As you know, these are all part of BRICS nations. So these are the 4 nations that have come together. These came together in 2009. Okay, in 2009 they came together and to form one grouping, and this happened during COP15. It happened in COP15, and this COP15 was in Copenhagen. Okay, it was in Copenhagen Climatic Summit. So these nations came together, okay, and they told that if their common minimum position is not met, then they will walk out together. This is basically like a bargaining power with the developed nations. Okay, so they represent a collective voice. They represent a collective voice at Conference of Parties of UNFCCC. So they represent a collective voice at the Conference of Parties of UNFCCC. Okay, so these are basic nations. So let me repeat, they are climatic groupings, or they are a grouping that necessitates a common voice for climatic negotiations. It can be regarding funding, bargaining power, agreements and initiatives. There are four newly industrialized nations that are Brazil, South Africa, India and China, which are also part of BRICS. It was formed in 2009 at the backdrop of Conference of Parties 15, which was Copenhagen Climatic Summit. And they basically have a common minimum position, and if the developed nations do not agree to this, then they can possibly walk out together. So it represents a collective voice at the Conference of Parties of UNFCCC. Okay, so this is what is basic nations. So the global stocktake should account for the failures of developed nations. See, the reason why they're telling they should account for failures of developed nations is because the climate change as a concept falls on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. So the differentiated part is the developed nations taking up more responsibilities. Hence, the the basic nation says that since the differentiated responsibility falls on the developed nations, they have to take up all the lost cause in their global stocktake. That is, if they have not performed well, then they have to make sure they compensate for their underperformance. So that is what is the sentiment of the basic nations in the COP28. So I hope this was clear and I hope this was helpful. The last issue of the day is India, disability inclusion and the power of buy. Okay, the power of buy. A very good analysis by the author. Now before I go to the analysis, let me just give you some amount of facts regarding disability. If you take the disability or persons with disability, I will keep addressing them as PWD. Okay, PWD means the persons with disability. Okay, so if I take persons with disability, globally we have 1.3 billion people who are suffering in some type of disability. Okay, out of this 1.3 billion, this is globally. Okay, globally you have 1.3 billion people. Out of this 1.3 billion people, 80% of these people live in developing nations or developing countries. Okay, and out of this 1.3 billion people, 70% live in rural areas. Now you are seeing how the developing nations are more having the concentration of disabled people. Okay, so this falls upon the onus globally to make sure that we focus in helping the developing nations where most of the developed disability people are concentrated. Okay, now if I take India in the context of India, we have, according to 2011 census, we have around 26.8 million people who suffer from disability, and this accounts to 2.21% of the total population of the country. Okay, so this is regarding the fact. Okay, the next is to give you a background of constitutional provisions. Regarding disability. Okay, now one is in our DPSP, that is Directive Principles of State Policy. You have Article 41. Okay, Article 41 says that state should make effective provisions. State must make effective provisions for people suffering from disability. Obviously, it involves other things also like unemployment, sickness, old age, but it has included the people with disability in this Article 41. The second is Article 46 that talks about the state should promote special care on education and economic interests on weaker sections. And weaker sections, the disabled population also come under the weaker sections. This is Article 46. The third is, you should know that disability or disabled people falls in state list. It falls in state list. It is given as relief to the disabled. This word called relief to the disabled is included in the state list. Okay. The fourth one is, if you take the 11th schedule, that is the Panchayat Raj institutions, you have Article 243G. Okay, this deals with the social welfare of the disabled. Okay, that fifth is the 12th schedule the 12th schedule, and here it is included in article 243W. Here there is safeguarding the interests of the disabled. Okay, so these are the important constitutional provisions that protects as well as promotes the welfare of the persons with disability. So I hope this is clear. We have article 41, 46, we have the state list, the 11th schedule 243G of the Panchayat Raj institutions, the 12th schedule 243W of the municipalities. Okay, so this is the background regarding disability. Okay, now coming to disability inclusion in India, we have come up with several legislative measures. Okay, so the legislative measures include: one, we have Rights to Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Rights to Persons with Disability Act 2016. Okay, so here we have actually included more than 21 disabilities. Okay, we have included more than 21 disabilities. It also includes the acid attack survivors. It also includes some intellectual disabilities. It also includes blood disorders, sickle cell anemia. Alright, so all this we have expanded the horizon of disabilities definition, and we have also improved upon the rights that is given to these disabilities. Okay, we also give unique IDs for this disabled population, and this unique IDs can act as identification for providing the benefits to these people. Okay, so this is the first legislative measure. The second is we also have something called Rehabilitation Council of India Act, Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. This basically is a Rehabilitation Council of India. This is basically an institution that is registered as a society, and this takes care of training all those personnel who are into rehabilitation. Okay, who are into rehabilitation in this field, who are there, they are taken care by this institute, which is a statutory body that comes under this Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. So that is the second legislative measure. The third is we have also come up with Mental Health Care Act 2017. Okay, so this Mental Health Care Act 2017 tries to do away with the stigma and tries to provide proper access and care to the people suffering from mental illness. Okay, so these are the three different legislative measures that we have taken in order to improve our disabled inclusiveness. To improve our disabled inclusiveness. Okay, but what the author tells is, as you can go here, we have to talk about the power of buy. Again, this analysis is good, you can use it in your answer. What the author says is, we have to provide them the power of buy. Okay, the reason why the author tells about this is, see, the author says that everywhere the approach to helping disabled, the approach is more for, and we have to transit the approach from for to buy. Okay, so basically the approach is, what we are doing is we are creating different policies, different frameworks for disabled. Okay, we are creating this for disabled without including them within the process. So we have to transit from this, and we have to use policies that are designed by them so that they are part of the process. Okay, it is not only in case of India, everywhere the author says everywhere the approach is more for and not by, and we have to transit from for to by in order to make the policies more meaningful. So it's a very good analysis. You need not have to keep this power of buy only to be used in disabled. We can use this power of buy as an analysis tool for transgenders, for weaker sections, for vulnerables, for marginals. See, that is the the analysis and the power of analysis. Okay, so it's a very good concept. So basically the author says we have to change the approach from for to by. That is the power of buy. Okay, so this is one analysis that the author says. The author also talks about another approach that they have started in India. That approach is known as, that's not an approach, that is a project a project known as Spark project. Okay, it is known as a Spark project. This project is started by International Labour Organization, International Fund for Agricultural Development, plus the Women's Development Corporation in Maharashtra. Okay, so these three I have started something called Spark project. Okay, Spark project is basically sparking disability inclusive rural transformation. As you learnt in the beginning, most of the disabled are present in the rural areas. So if you want to make disability inclusive, you have to transform the population in rural areas, and that is what this project is talking about. Okay, so it is sparking disability in rural, sparking disability inclusive in rural transformation. That is what is Spark project. Okay, so this basically follows the by approach, and it gives you the power of by and it replaces the approach of for. That is what is this particular article talking about. So this is the entire thing. So this is how you have to study. Now see, by listening to this session, you have got the notes holistically on disability and persons with disability. So this is how you have to make notes on any topic. If you take any concept, you got to know the definition, you got to know the constitutional angle, you also got to know what are the legal measures, you also got to know a way of analysis. Okay, and you also have very good amount of information. Okay, that is information or facts. See, like this, if you have completed all these dimensions within 3 pages, so your notes on disability is done. So like this, you should proceed on all the bullet points that are there in GS2. You will more or less finish your mains notes making. Okay, and this is how your mains notes making has to be done, and I am giving you an example with GS2. This is how you have to do for GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. Whenever the context comes for other papers, I'll keep mentioning them, but in this scenario the context is for GS2, so I'm trying to highlight how you have to make notes regarding GS2. So I hope this was helpful, guys, and please make sure that you like, share and subscribe, as well as please spread this initiative to all your friends so that they can also make use of it. Thank you so much for all the love and support. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Bye.